Hello and welcome to Tremaine Sci-Fi Hour. Today we are discussing fictional drugs. Well, yeah, hopefully fictional drugs. We will be discussing a variety of drugs from a variety of sci-fi elements. Some containing from Brave New World, some from Dune, and some from books I haven't heard of because Jag told me about them 5 minutes ago. So, to start us off, Jag, also, sorry, I should mention that we have an Instagram page and a Facebook page that you should go check out so that you never miss an episode again. So, Jag, Soma.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A drug that is in Brave New World, written by Aldous Huxley, and it's a drug that in small doses is sort of like a benzo almost, and in high doses is a hallucinogen in some way. So sort of like benzos. And if you know what benzos are, they're benzodiazepines, which are commonly prescribed for what reason, Jag?
You'd probably most likely find them being used for anti-anxiety.
Right.
They do work on a lot of things, though. They can be
seizures
good
and
muscle relaxants. Yep, seizures. They're used for alcohol withdrawal. Anything where you need to be brought down a bit and just smoothed.
Yeah.
Benzos are pretty much the go-to for that.
And so Soma is sort of, it's described in a similar way. I think I've experienced benzodiazepines because I've been treated with them for. I'm still treated with them. In fact, I've got a small bottle of clonazepam right next to me, right? So there is a great deal of it relaxes you, basically. It's I mean, it's not something you want to. We should specify by saying we should start the episode by saying generally don't do drugs.
If you're gonna do drugs, don't abuse drugs.
Yeah, because drugs will abuse you.
Oh, they'll always win. You have much more to lose than the drugs do. They'll fight dirty.
Drugs will make you think your own grandmother tried to eat you.
Now, if you want how the book Brave New World describes Soma,
yeah, go ahead.
All the advantages of Christianity and alcohol, none of the defects. Which tells you a bit about Aldous Huxley. But the religious connection there is interesting because I also see Soma as having a little bit of sort of opiate qualities to it as well. And there's the famous saying, religion is the opiate of the masses. So I see a little bit of a parallel there as well. But yeah, so in Brave New World, the government just sees how bad things is, obviously, and is quite happy for people to be numb and placid and obedient.
So what it says here in the Spark Notes, the citizens of the world state are encouraged to take Soma. So they're not enforced to take Soma. Soma is not something that they need, that they are required by law to take, which does set apart Brave New World and Soma from some of the other works of fiction that have drugs that people are enforced to take. Nothing springs to mind immediately except for the Rick and Morty episode where the Galactic Federation takes over and they can only eat pills. So, it's sort of, the drug is used to make sure people who would be upset, who would be thinking, who would be doing things that generally aren't helpful to a dictatorship, just chill out for a bit.
Yeah, so I'm aware of a couple of parallel medications.
Right.
So the film Equilibrium has a drug called Prosium. going by the name, it's supposed to be a combination of Prozac and Valium. Valium being a benzo and Prozac being an antidepressant. So the main difference there being that in equilibrium, you have to take it because emotions are not allowed.
Right.
It's very much a similar world to V for Vendetta. It has a lot of homages to Nazi-style totalitarian dystopian futures.
Right.
Also has a little bit of Fahrenheit. Help me out here, Gandhi. Fahrenheit
451.
451. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
By Ray Bradbury, to be discussed soon.
It's on the list.
It's on the list.
So Equilibrium, mainly known for its gun kata, a subset of gun fu. Anyone who feels emotions is a sense offender, and the lead character is a member of the clerics, I think they're called,
Right.
who their whole job is to search and destroy art, literature, music, anything that causes emotion,
Right.
and execute those involved. Hence the connection to Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, that's very much like
And
Fahrenheit 451.
there was something I watched with my partner. There was an anime with a similar thing, where a person had an unregistered child. Oh, I'll have to remember what that one is.
So, just some people may be wondering what we're talking about and why we're talking about these drugs in particular. So, something that we should keep in mind as we move forward as a society is we will eventually develop drugs that will probably have some elements of these effects. We may actually have them already. I'm just not aware of them. And so I think what a lot of fiction tries to do is give us an idea of what society could look like if we are not careful with how we act with these drugs. So, for example, in Brave New World, the drug Soma is used to basically keep the population the citizens of the world state docile, compliant, yeah. That it's used to make sure that people, when they experience discomfort, don't do anything about the discomfort. They merely take a pill to ignore the discomfort. And I find that some parallels with modern, and this is not me saying, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving you medical advice. This is what I see with a lot of treatments, especially coming from psychiatric, my background in having been in psychiatric hospitals and what else? But just generally being in the mental health system, is a lot of people are immediately treated with drugs like antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and a lot of the time talking therapy is because it's such a not a rare commodity, but like a what would you call it, Jug?
It's time expensive.
It's time expensive. Sometimes it doesn't work, and some people are resistant to it. And even
People
though
do expect results now. If you're in the middle of a break, it's give him a shot of prochlorperazine, get him down.
right, but then oftentimes if someone isn't in their break, I mean, there's a difference between being in the middle of a psychotic episode and coming into the clinic to say that you don't feel happy or you've never felt happy or anything like that, where you're treated immediately with, well, sorry, I'm only speaking from experience, but you're sort of treated with these very, very powerful drugs. And I'm not saying that they're bad or that they're good in any way. I'm just saying that they are. I mean, they're not something to just play with, are they, Jack? Like, Benzos are incredibly addictive, and incredibly dangerous if used in the wrong way. So a lot of these drugs have parallels to the real world, but they are
I
yeah,
suppose what we're looking at is how the different pieces of media, like what they're actually exploring, what are their
right,
messages
yeah,
when they're bringing in these drugs.
and
So
so
with Brave New World, with Equilibrium, um,
and
with We
Joy, I
Happy
think, was
Few,
the
yep,
one, yeah,
Joy is the drug from the video game We Happy Few. It is a warning about complacency allowing the creation or furthering of dystopian things. There's the classic saying, "All evil needs to win is." I'm butchering this, but all that evil requires to win is for good people to do nothing. Well, if they can get you to do nothing,
well,
uh,
I think it was Roosevelt who said, "Empty stomachs and out of work men are the stuff that fascism's made of," and that was, oh sorry, dictatorships are made of, and that sort of talks to how we sort of maintain how a lot of these books work. Some of them choose to use the starving population like 1984 as a way of maintaining control through basically making you work so much or limiting your language so much that you never think or you never have time to think. Or,
yeah,
yeah,
it's something found in pretty much all cultures in some form or another. We've got the devil finds work for idle hands. If you have the time and the energy to go for something else, that's when you're dangerous.
right. And when you're dangerous, that generally isn't a good thing for the established
Establishment.
class, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so aside from getting ourselves on the FBI watch list, well, they can't get us here, so the CIA watch list. Um,
Five Eyes are aware of us, don't you worry.
so, don't worry, we don't have enough viewers for that.
Oh no,
So,
I'm already on there.
God damn it, Jake. So, so we've sort of discussed loosely about drugs that
Population control.
population control through drugs that do good. Not
Well,
good, sorry, do good things for the person. So,
well,
um, so I mean, I'm just speaking about Soma so much because it's the only one I really know aside from Spice, which we are going to talk about. Um, it is sort of what you would call
what would you call?
it's I mean it's given out, it's not enforced as we said, it's given out freely,
But
which
surely
should
good citizens would never be without Soma.
and that's where the trap is, yes. The idea that you
It can
can
be easier to do it with cultural control, because once you're saying you have to do something, you get contrarians. If it's just surely a great idea and look, everyone else is happy.
everyone else is
Oh
doing
boy.
it. Yeah, peer pressure is a lot more powerful than a gun, is what Jag is saying. Um,
It gun's more powerful, but it breeds resentment.
so, we've talked about the effects these drugs could have on society. Let's talk about the effects these drugs have on the individual. So, I know Soma is purely, there's no side effect other than the fact you are completely and utterly useless to society.
No
Um,
hangover, doesn't that sound great?
well, not
I
as
mean, it's
useless to
naturally good.
society. You're useful to society. You're just no use to the advancement of mankind. So, what about prosium? What's some of the drawbacks of prosium, if there are any?
Well, it completely flattens all emotions.
Right.
Which the idea is, so it's presented to the population as a way of, well, first of all, it is required. You must take your protein.
Okay.
But it is presented as its purpose as being allowing people to make rational decisions, allowing you to be better people. Um,
Right.
but of course, without emotions, you're missing one of the greatest, both in sense of quality, but also just quantity of the human experience.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
There are a
I mean,
lot of
you
good
are a.
emotions.
I mean, even the bad ones are still a strong part of human. Uh,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think
sadness is incredibly relatable. You know.
I think it was Butters Stotch on South Park who said, "I know I'm sad now, but at least I'm happy that there's something that in the world that could make me." Sorry, it was. I'm glad there's something in the world that can make me so happy that I feel this sad when it's gone. And that's something very important, I suppose, is what these drugs also talk about, which is experiencing the moment, which a lot of, I think, Catcher in the Rye and a lot of the older works tried to talk about because they were, I think, wary of the amount of drugs and alcohol being taken by the youth at that time, and they were probably a little influenced by that, but also a lot of them were drug takers and alcohol abusers themselves, and they felt that sort of slip of connection. But what? So you were saying Prosium is an enforced drug, and they hunt down sort of the. So it's marketed as something to make you rational, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's the justification given, and with everyone having their emotions dampened so much, they do need justification to continue because they know that they don't feel happier without it. With it, they need to know that they're better, and without those emotions, they're willing to believe that. In terms of the creators themselves doing drugs, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, it's well known that he did mescaline. Um, yeah.
Right. So
Did
I
he
mean,
write, or was he? Yes, he wrote The Doors of Perception, his autobiography about doing mescaline. Uh,
yeah, and I don't know what mescaline's like. Do you, Jack?
yeah.
What's it like?
Oh boy. I see why he called it The Doors of Perception because similar to say LSD or the indoles, 2cc, 25C, all of those sorts of things, it messes with how you view things.
Right.
It doesn't, like, everyone sees hallucinogens. Well, hallucinogens themselves are drugs that cause hallucinations. They
Right.
make you see things that are not there. Whereas most drugs that we consider hallucinogens mainly affect how you see things that are there.
Right.
So with mescaline, with LSD, you don't see people who aren't there. You see lines curving. Um, with mushrooms, a common effect is people say the walls are breathing, and it's because they're just slowly pulsing towards and away from you.
Right. So
And
it's yeah, yeah.
yeah, you don't look over and there's a friend. They're like, oh, Tim's shown up and he's not actually there. That doesn't happen with most psychedelics.
Right. That would be a nice thing, but the walls breathing are probably quite an interesting thing to experience, and I imagine it's not something that is for everyone, but I can imagine. I think something I should describe as during moments of psychosis. Well, actually, sorry, I shouldn't say psychosis. I experience hallucinations on a daily basis due to my illness, and I've learnt to sort of suss out what is real and what isn't. You sort of know that, okay, there's no one following the car because no one else in the car is reacting to it. You know that there's not someone sitting naked in the cafe because no one else is reacting to it. And a lot of it can be, it's a lot easier on drugs. I think Jake and I have had this discussion before to know when a hallucination is a hallucination, right? Because you go into the thing knowing, okay, this is the drug, this is what I'm going to experience, right? Is that sort of what?
Yeah, yeah. If I recall correctly, there's supposed to be, I think, three different related concepts where there's hallucinations, illusions, and delusions.
Right,
Um, and the biggest difference is, do you believe it?
right.
Um, so
Which
I
is,
have had an event that was completely sober. Where I know, shocking, isn't it? Me sober. No, it's been over a decade since I've last done drugs. So apparently it was some form of migraine, but I saw something that was not actual,
right.
and it freaked me out. Um,
I don't remember
but a
taking
big,
this.
yeah. And the situation was, if I was on drugs, this would be fine because I'd know that it is going to end. I'd know the cause. I can, from some experience, I can be calm through it.
Because it
Um,
will end.
yeah, yeah.
Which is a stark contrast to how you feel when it's a not natural, you know what I mean, a organic hallucination, fresh and organic hallucinations. No, when you experience hallucinations that are not drug influenced, you start to realize this is forever. Sorry, you start to think this is forever. This is going to be my reality. This is real. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And it suddenly you lose power. And when you lose power, you start to panic.
Yeah, so I think your situations would commonly be considered delusions
Yeah, I'm
or
delusional. Yeah,
delusional hallucinations, in that you see something unreal and you believe it. You just accept it as fact.
yeah.
Um,
And it's very difficult to not accept it as fact when you are standing there, know that you're completely sober, know that you're, well, not completely within your mind at that point, but you are completely sober, you're standing there, and there is a man and a woman sitting naked in the cafe, acting like
as
it's
we do.
normal. Acting like it's normal. And you're sitting there going, what is, what? And if you're wondering why I circle around that, it happened. I was, there's a PB Tech in Rosedale, I think, and there's a cafe near it, and I was sitting there with my dad, and in walked these two naked people, but they had sort of like smoothed over faces with like just the mouth, and they just sat down and just started drinking, and I was like, I was just looking around like, are we not gonna, are we gonna, and then they turned and looked at me, and that that was it. I bolted out of the cafe, ran down the street, and was like, nope, 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 nope. And that's the effect, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
the
faceless is a common uh, thing um, with drugs and with mental health concerns.
right. Yeah.
I'm not like I've heard possible reasons.
Oh yeah. Go. I mean, go on. This is far more interesting than just droning on about society. What? What's some of the reasons?
Well, you may have heard that every face you see in a dream is actually someone you've met before,
Right,
because we are bad at making up faces. Um,
right,
it's hard to create a face, and so if your mind has created someone who is supposed to be a stranger, it can't just slot in something it knows, because
right.
that
Okay,
would
yeah.
be incongruent. It wouldn't jibe with that, and it would be like, well, I know this person,
Why
you
are they
know,
naked in the cafe? Yeah, no.
and somehow that makes less sense than a faceless being.
Well, something I learned a long time ago is mental illness doesn't always make sense.
Yeah.
Um, I've had experiences where I've had a personality try to save me by jumping out of a moving car in the middle of the highway.
As you do.
Now I was lucky enough to roll off into like the off side of it and not get hit by a car, but you
So you want
know,
to put yourself outwards and backwards, maybe about a 35-degree angle,
I don't know how I
between left and
survive a
sideways,
lot of these things, Jag. I
and
just know that I do.
roll if you can.
And the long story short, the the personality believed that we were in danger, and so in order to get out of that danger, they put me in worse danger.
Yeah,
And so
the
that
sense of danger is sincere and to it reasonable. The response is
well, it's
instinctive.
as my psychologist explains, it's a childlike. They're childlike. They don't have the ability to rationalize, which actually this whole thing brings us on to. Actually, no, I'll say one more thing. So, something like mania, and now I am linking this in with something. Mania is a sort of state that you get into with bipolar or with well, I don't know if there's other illnesses that can do it, but bipolar-like symptoms mean that you can have massive ups and massive downs. Now, these ups are fun for the person experiencing them, not for anyone else around them. That should be made clear. If you read, there's a article in Psychology Today talking about hypomania and mania, and but the parents of bipolar teenagers and things like that often say, "Can you get rid of the mania and the depression?" And the patient often says, "Can you just get rid of the depression?" And that's because for the reality for a lot of these people is you're an asshole when you're in a manic episode. And so that sort of brings me on to Spice, because Spice allows you to do things, right, Jag? It allows you. Well, it's different in Star Wars. I'm not sure what it does in Star Wars, but what does it do in Dune, for example?
So it's very dose dependent.
Okay, so let's start
The
with a low dose and then move our way up.
uh, the aristocracy,
Yeah,
the nobles, House Harkonnen, House, all the different ones.
yeah,
Uh, they take low amounts frequently, and this extends people's life to a ridiculous degree. It like doubles or so the life expectancy if you can have enough of it often enough.
right,
Um, Even the richest of people, unless you're the emperor or in his family, you're not getting enough to maximize the effect. But a decent noble is getting enough to add 20 or so years to his life.
right,
Uh, then we have the medium doses, or relatively medium doses, because it's a lot of books, it goes a lot of places.
right,
So, for example, the freemen, they consume a fair bit. Their fabric is woven from it. It gets into them. For them, it has effects such as they'll have like flashes of the future. If I recall, part of the reason they're such good fighters is because they have an almost spidey sense from
Right.
constant exposure to spice. So they're hard to fight because they have this,
The dark
measured
side of
in milliseconds.
the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities.
I mean, it's only, as I say, like milliseconds, but if you're fighting with a Maker's Tooth, a little crysknife or something,
Right.
it's gonna be a big difference.
Right. If it was someone pointing a gun at them, it's going to be very difficult for them to get out of that with a few millisecond advantage. But
exactly, you can't dodge bullets, but maybe you can be turned a little more so the knife just nicks you. It makes a difference, as I say.
Yeah.
Then there's higher doses, in which case there's two main examples, I'd say. Oh, three. One is the Navigators. These
Right.
great big, gross people who live in spice tanks. They are constantly breathing in, like, refined spice, and that gives them a bit more than just glimpses into the future. As I said, they are the Navigators. Their thing is that they, so that they, I'm having trouble putting it in words. They set the paths for faster than light travel in ships.
Right.
And to do so because it's faster than light, people can't navigate. If there's a planet in the way, that's a big problem. A moon, that's obviously going to destroy your ship.
Right.
But at faster than light, a half-gram piece of plastic is going to blow a hole the size of, say, a basketball through your hull. It's not good. So they load up on an extra heavy dose of spice right before the ship takes off. They set the final tweaks and controls until their branching futures that they can see collapse into a safe one, and then hit the go, and bam. The ship travels through space, avoiding all the space debris, and yay, they get where they're going. So that's one of the three examples. The other example would be on the planet Arrakis, or Dune. There is religious ceremonies involving spice, for a variety of reasons, if I recall. Like, it is done for prophecy, but it's also done, like, to test people, to see, like, how connected they are to Shai-Hulud, the sandworm god. Religious, anyway.
Right.
And then there's what happens to the God Emperor. So spoilers for a book older than anyone listening. God Emperor of Dune, a descendant of Paul Atreides, becomes a sandworm, and also a god.
What's the difference?
He gains perfect knowledge of the future, which also means he's locked into the future that he saw. And then
that classic thing. The prophecy,
yeah,
therefore.
Yeah, the problem of prophecy, the prophecy locks you into the future prophesized. And the better your knowledge of the future, the more certain it is.
An example of that would be actually. Sorry, I I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but it just sprung to me. No, it's not. It's the Oedipus Rex. So in Oedipus's father, I can't remember his name, learning about his son killing him and marrying his mother. In learning that, he ensured the prophecy would come to fruition, right?
Yeah, and that's seen in a lot of things. Even before that, you've got just the Greek gods themselves. Before the Olympians were the Titans, and the Titans had received a prophecy that his son was going to kill him and overthrow him, so he ate all his children until eventually Zeus was replaced by a boulder. It was eaten instead, and then Zeus, mad at the fact that his father had eaten all of his siblings,
Yeah,
did as prophesized.
yeah, and that's
If
and
he
that
hadn't worked against the prophecy, they probably would have ruled together.
yeah. I
Yeah,
actually so in
prophecy.
funny enough in Star Wars I don't actually see that.
Oh, okay.
In Star Wars okay, sorry, I shouldn't say
I thought
that.
there was some Darth Vader stuff with.
So the prophecy about Anakin Skywalker is he shall bring balance to the Force.
He did. It was heavily weighted towards the Jedi.
No, no. Obviously, the interpretation of balance is a problem because who said the prophecy? And if it was a Jedi, it was probably the balance of the Force by bringing it completely to the light. But
I was
so
thinking more along the lines of him prophesizing the death of Padme.
Padme. Oh yeah. So sorry, I was getting to that.
Yeah.
So Padme in Padme's Padme is he sees glimpses into the future as he did Anakin Skywalker we're talking about. As he did with his mother before she died. He sees glimpses of Padme dying in childbirth. And in trying to save his wife, he essentially dooms his wife to that fate. By joining the dark side, he allows her to die, essentially. And the same.
Really critically enough, I didn't know they were married.
so,
Thought they were just snuggle buddies.
Fuck buddies. Like Rachel and Joe Wilkinson. So also what we see is Palpatine.
That guy's granddaughter.
So what we also these are old controversies. So what we see also is Palpatine getting very what do you call it? When he says everything is proceeding as I have foreseen, his overconfidence allows him to believe in one of the certain futures he sees. Anyway, getting back to spice. So we've seen the effects of spice.
Yes.
Do we know if Frank Herbert was on any drugs?
I do not know, but it's not his only work that contains drugs.
Right.
So I wouldn't be too surprised.
And so I think that should enter in probably the final part of our talk, which I haven't told Jake about, but I just want to discuss. So,
where babies come from?
So a lot of great writers have either drank, done a lot of drugs, or people like Hemingway, Stephen King,
Philip K. Dick, Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, a lot of them have done drugs and have drank and smoked and done all sorts of things.
Think Burroughs?
And so I think that makes me wonder. So because I'm completely clean, back and forth. I have never touched a marijuana. I've never touched.
Oh, I said definitely William S. Burroughs. Sorry, I do have the book Junkie. Yes.
So
Quaaludes.
Quaaludes. Oh, Jag was born in the wrong era. So, I'm completely clean. I've always been completely clean because I always figured I've got enough on my mind. I don't need anything else. But Jag, do you think, and this is just talking about creativity to a degree, do you think these drugs enhance creativity? And I'm not saying either of us are medical professionals, either of us, we're just philosophizing and also just thinking about this. Do you think they do anything for creativity?
They have the potential to. A big thing with drugs is set and setting.
Right.
So if a person is in the right mindset, if the person is primed for some degree of positivity, is prepared for an experience, is just capable of it going okay, basically, then it can. It does not mean that it will. And it's one of those things where there's always a risk, and it is such a risk. I cannot honestly recommend pretty much any drugs outside of very specific situations. And even then, again, set and setting. The few times I'd recommend drugs would be if someone has cluster headaches. There is reason to believe that low doses of psychotropic mushrooms can help. A doctor should be administering those.
A doctor should be doing that, not some guy on the podcast. Yeah, I know. We know what you're saying, yeah. So
there's potential for MDMA to be useful as part of treatment for PTSD.
Ooh.
and for recontextualizing traumatic events.
Right. But I suppose that
any drug can be medicine, and that's where drugs have the highest potential, is as medicine.
And also, so the reason I ask is because this morning I was writing, and I'm currently scaling, so I'm trying to get to 2,000 words a day so that I can finish novels and short stories relatively quickly, right? And I noticed as I was writing, I wasn't actually thinking any of these words that were coming out. Like, as I was writing, I have no idea who wrote or why I wrote that. It just came out like that. And so I have this picture in my head, and I can only express it with words that come from some strange place. And so when I was doing that, I thought, is this a religious experience? Is this a drug experience? What is this? And it made me wonder, is creativity the ultimate drug that exists for us? And is that what we try to do with drugs? Do we try to enhance essentially the world that we can perceive with creativity, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
It varies so much.
Right.
There are artists who will swear by LSD as a source for their creativity. And that might be true for them. That's not as true for the opiate addict who just wants to be someone else for a while. There's so many reasons. There's probably as many reasons as there are people.
Right.
Creativity, yes, that's a reason for some people. Escapism, that's a reason for others. Yeah, it's just.
And so I think that's sort of what I wanted to sort of touch on for people who may be wondering, should I do drugs? Should I not? Probably not. But
it's never a solution.
it's never a solution. It's something that...
It can certainly be a method.
And also, if you think it'll improve your writing, or improve anything you're doing,
I'd say look into what you feel you're missing from your writing.
I would also
and why you're missing it.
I would also ask you to consider time and not using quick fixes to try and solve issues that need years to be fixed. I've been in therapy since 2013, and I'm still a very long way away from achieving complete independence. But I still maintain that I need to continue if I want to ever get to that independence. Now, if someone said, okay, if you take LSD, it'll fix it in a day, obviously you're tempted to do it. But...
oh, if it were true.
If it were true. But it's not true. If you think your writing is bland, go live a life. Go out and get divorced or have an illegitimate child. Or go to a cafe naked and freak me out.
I would usually recommend travel. Maybe not in the current global situation, but travel's alright.
Travel, going into a new town, complete with only like $1,000 and trying to figure out how the hell you live on that. Go out, get a girlfriend, get a boyfriend.
Hotel for a week, just see what people there do.
People watch. Go watch people.
If you're not interesting, find people who are.
Yeah, that's what I did with Jag. Yeah. So, yeah.
Tell 'em.
Nobody tell them. Yeah, so, yeah, what I suppose I'm saying is Jag can speak from...
Drugs are great in fiction.
Drugs are great in fiction, and they solve problems in fiction. But people are more complicated than we can ever write. And it is going to be incredibly difficult to come back from whatever you get yourself into. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope that wasn't too depressing. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, that was the episode on recreational drugs and sci-fi, and also things.
Well, look, a podcast. I can do what I want, Jay. This podcast is going nowhere. I can do what I want. Thanks for listening. Bye.